Please, don't do this. I didn't steal anything." The words burst from Maya Williams' throat as the sting of pain shot up her arm. The pressing iron had just grazed her skin hot, hissing, cruel. She screamed, the sound echoing off the polished marble of the Reeds' master bedroom. Moments earlier, she had been doing what she always did, quietly pressing Mr. Reed's crisp white shirts for the week. Steam curled into the air, the smell of lavender starch softening the silence. The afternoon light streamed through tall windows, casting gold across the floor. Maya hummed under her breath, a habit she carried from the orphanage small tunes to calm herself. Then, as she leaned forward, the top of her uniform shifted slightly, and something glimmered at her neck, a small gold pendant, swinging free for the first time. Victoria Reed noticed immediately. The elegant, fair-skinned woman was standing by the vanity mirror, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. But when the light caught that pendant, her gaze snapped up. "What is that?" she said sharply. Maya froze, startled. "Ma'am?" "The necklace." Victoria's tone turned razor-sharp. "Where did you get that?" Maya touched it instinctively, her fingers trembling. It's just something I've always had. I don't really know where it came from." Victoria's expression darkened. "That's a Reed family pendant. My husband's mother had one just like it." "How convenient that you don't remember." "I didn't steal it," Maya said quickly, her voice breaking. "I swear, Mrs. Reed." "Don't lie to me." Victoria's voice rose, cutting the air. She stepped forward, the hem of her silk robe sweeping the floor. "You think I don't see what you're doing? You've been trying to make him notice you smiling, playing sweet, pretending to be innocent." "I haven't, please." The argument escalated in seconds. Victoria grabbed the iron from the board, steam billowing from its mouth. "You're wearing my family's crest, you thief." "Ma'am, no." Maya tried to back away, but Victoria's hand moved fast, fueled by jealousy and rage. The iron's edge caught Maya's forearm. The hiss turned into a scream. Maya fell to the floor, clutching her arm, tears spilling down her face. The smell of scorched fabric and skin filled the room. At that exact moment, footsteps pounded up the stairs. "Victoria," Daniel Reed's voice thundered from the hallway. The door flew open, slamming against the wall. Daniel froze in the doorway, seeing his wife with the iron still in her hand, his maid crying on the floor. "What the hell is happening here?" His tone was low, dangerous. She stole from us," Victoria stammered, breathless. "She's been wearing the Reed pendant. Look around her neck." Daniel's eyes darted from Victoria's flushed face to Maya's trembling form. His anger turned to disbelief. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed his wife's wrist, and yanked the iron away. The iron clattered to the floor, its hiss fading into silence. "Are you insane?" he shouted. "You burned her?" "She's lying," Victoria snapped back, yanking at her robe. "Ask her where she got that necklace before you start defending her." Daniel's jaw tightened. He turned toward Maya, who was trying to steady her breathing. "Let me see it," he said, his voice softening but firm. Maya hesitated, frightened, still holding her arm. "Please, sir, I didn't." "Let me see it," he repeated, gently this time. He helped her sit up, his hand supporting her shoulder. As she moved, the pendant slipped into view again, gold, old, delicate. Daniel's eyes fixed on it. Something inside him shifted. He reached out and carefully lifted the chain from her neck. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The engraved letter R shimmered faintly beneath the chandelier light. A single curved scratch near the clasp, the same mark he remembered from decades ago. He whispered, almost to himself, This was my sister's." Victoria laughed bitterly. "Your sister?" "Daniel. She died in that fire, remember? You buried that necklace with her?" His eyes narrowed. "We buried ashes, Victoria. We never found her body." The air grew heavy. Only the faint hum of the iron cooling filled the silence. Maya blinked through tears. "Sir, I've had it since I was found. The nuns said it was around my neck when they brought me in. I don't know who it belonged to." "Found?" Daniel asked quietly. "Where?" "Outside Street Bernadette Orphanage," Maya whispered. "They said I was 2 years old." Daniel felt his knees weaken. His sister Layla had been 5 the night their home burned down. Her small voice still haunted his dreams. "Danny, help me." The fire, the guilt, the years of silence. He looked at Maya again, at her trembling hands, her soft brown eyes. Something in her expression, the shape of her jawline, struck him like lightning. "God," he breathed. "It can't be." Victoria stepped forward, voice trembling between anger and fear. "Daniel, she's manipulating you. She's some poor girl who got lucky and found a trinket. Don't let her fool you." He turned on her sharply. "You nearly branded her, Victoria. You could have killed her." "She was wearing our crest," she shouted back. "How do you think that looks, a maid pretending to be one of us?" "Maybe," Daniel said slowly, his eyes locked on the pendant. "She's not pretending." The words dropped like a stone into the room's silence. Maya's eyes widened. "Sir?" Daniel exhaled shakily. "We'll find out," he said. "I'm calling Greg. We're running a DNA test." "You're joking," Victoria said, voice trembling. "No," he replied coldly. "For once, I'm not." Outside, thunder rolled over the Charleston sky. Inside, the Reed mansion stood still, the smell of steam and burnt fabric lingering in the air. And in Daniel's hand lay a golden pendant, an heirloom thought lost to fire while a truth long buried began to flicker back to life. If this story moved you, give it a like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. You might find someone nearby watching this too. The rain came down harder now, pattering against the tall windows of the Reed estate, as if the sky itself were trying to warn them. Inside, the storm had already arrived. Daniel sat in his study, still wearing the same suit he'd stormed into the bedroom with. The pendant lay on the polished mahogany desk in front of him, the gold catching the light from the desk lamp. It was such a small thing, barely the size of a quarter, but it was as if the weight of it had fractured his reality. Across from him, Maya sat wrapped in a soft gray throw blanket, her arm freshly bandaged. The housekeeper, Mrs. Ellison, had administered first aid after Victoria fled the room, seething and speechless. Maya hadn't said much since. Neither had Daniel, but the silence between them wasn't empty. It pulsed with memory, fear, and questions neither knew how to form. Daniel finally broke it. "I thought this pendant was gone forever," he said, his voice low, distant. "It was supposed to be buried with my sister." Maya looked at him, her eyes still glassy. "You had a sister?" He nodded. "Her name was Layla. She was 5 years old when the fire happened." "What kind of fire?" Maya asked cautiously. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his eyes far away. "It was at my parents' lake house outside Columbia. I was 20 then, home from college for the weekend. The place went up so fast. There wasn't time. She was upstairs, playing in her room. I tried God. I tried to get to her." Maya's hand tightened around the edge of the blanket. There was something in his voice, a weight that had settled deep, like sediment in the soul. "They never found her body?" she asked. "No," he said, shaking his head. "Only ashes, some fragments, and this pendant melted into the carpet. At least, we thought it was hers. My father insisted on burying it with what little we had left." He gestured to the necklace. "But this one isn't melted. It's whole, and the scratch." He picked it up again, holding it delicately. "She made that with her teeth. She used to chew on it when she was nervous. She had this habit." Maya looked down at her lap, feeling a strange tightening in her chest. "I chew my fingernails. Always have." Daniel blinked at her. "I don't know why," she continued. "It's just always been a part of me. Like the necklace. I didn't even think it was special. Just something mine." "No." Daniel rubbed a hand down his face. "There's too much that fits. Your age, where you were found, the pendant, even the way you look." Maya lifted her eyes to meet his. "Do I look like her?" He hesitated. "You look like our mother." That word "our" landed on the floor like glass. Maya sat back, stunned. "But I'm not white." Daniel leaned forward. "My mother was Creole, mixed. Layla had darker skin than me, too. It caused some tension in the family. My father never liked how people stared when we went out." Maya's breath caught. "So, I could be her?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and dialed. "Greg, I need you here. Tonight. Bring a DNA kit. No, I'm not joking. And tell no one. Understood? He hung up and looked back at her. I don't know what's happening yet, he admitted. But if there's even the slightest chance, we need to find out. Maya clutched the blanket tighter. I don't know if I want to know. Daniel softened. I get it. I do. But you deserve the truth. Footsteps sounded outside the study. Mrs. Ellison poked her head in gently. Mr. Reed? Your wife has locked herself in the guest room. She's refusing to speak to anyone. Daniel nodded without looking up. Let her. The housekeeper paused. Would you like some tea for Miss Maya? Maya shook her head, but Daniel said, Yes, chamomile, please. Mrs. Ellison disappeared down the hall. Daniel turned back to Maya. Have you ever had flashes, visions, dreams of a house burning? Maya looked startled. How did you? She stopped herself. Daniel's voice lowered. You've seen it, haven't you? Tears welled in her eyes. I thought it was just my imagination. A house with white shutters. The sound of someone screaming my name, Layla, get out. Sometimes I'd wake up sweating. The orphanage chalked it up to trauma. Daniel's breath shook. That's exactly what I yelled. Zal. They sat in silence again, both unsure of what they were beginning to uncover. Outside, lightning streaked the sky, illuminating the pendant again. It seemed to shimmer with meaning now, as if it had waited decades for this moment. Greg arrived less than an hour later, his suit still crisp despite the downpour. You sure about this, Daniel? Daniel nodded. Just take the samples. Greg swabbed Maya's cheek first. Her hands trembled. Then he took Daniel's. We'll know in 48 hours, he said, placing the samples in a sealed kit. But Daniel, this kind of thing, it doesn't stay quiet for long. The media will eat it alive if it leaks. It won't leak, Daniel said coldly. Not from you, not from anyone. Greg nodded and left. Maya stayed seated even after the door shut. She looked at the pendant again. If I am your sister, everything I thought I knew about myself changes. Daniel exhaled. If you are my sister, everything I thought I lost comes back. He reached across the desk, placing the pendant gently in her palm. Hold on to it, no matter what happens next. And with that, the storm outside faded to a drizzle. But inside, a new one was just beginning. Rain had softened to a whisper by morning, but the Reed estate remained wrapped in an unnatural quiet, the kind of silence that followed explosions, not of bombs, but of truth. Maya sat alone in the staff lounge, still wrapped in the same gray throw blanket. The sting on her arm reminded her it hadn't been a dream. The welt was hidden now under gauze and antiseptic, but the ache pulsed with each heartbeat. She couldn't go back to sleep. Not after what had happened. Not after what she might be. Daniel's sister. She whispered the words in her head, over and over, but they refused to settle into place. Her reflection in the small mirror above the sink looked the same tired eyes, same too-tight bun, same dark skin that had always marked her as other in a house built on legacy and whiteness. But now there was history behind her eyes. Now there was blood. Her hand drifted to her neck. The pendant was gone back in her coat pocket, wrapped in a silk handkerchief. She couldn't bring herself to wear it just yet. Maya? The soft voice came from the hallway. Mrs. Ellison appeared in the doorway holding a steaming cup of tea. You didn't come down for breakfast. Figured you could use something warm. Thank you, Maya said, her voice hoarse. I didn't want to face anyone. You don't have to. Not today. The older woman sat beside her. And no one's saying anything. Mr. Reed made sure of it. Maya accepted the cup. Does everyone know? Mrs. Ellison gave a small nod. They saw what Victoria did. Word travels fast in this house. But as for the rest, the DNA test, the pendant, only Mr. Reed, Mr. Sanders, and me. And I only know because I've been here long enough to connect the dots. Maya looked up sharply. You think it's true? The housekeeper smiled softly. I remember Layla. I was new when she was still around. Always humming, always playing with that necklace. She used to chew on the chain when she was nervous. You do the same. Maya didn't respond. She didn't know how. Some things, Mrs. Ellison said, don't need science to prove they belong. She reached out and gave Maya's hand a light squeeze before standing. Tea will help, but rest would help more. After she left, Maya sat in silence, the weight of history pressing into her like the pendant used to against her skin. Daniel stood in front of the fireplace in his private study, staring into flames he barely felt. He hadn't slept. How could he? His mind had played the same scene over and over, the way Maya looked up at him in pain, the sound of Victoria's voice dripping with accusation, the moment he saw that pendant and felt the air leave his lungs. He rubbed his thumb along the bridge of his nose. A sister, alive. After 24 years of silence and grief, he thought of his father's funeral, the empty seat at every holiday table, the way his mother's voice had cracked every time she said Layla's name. He had buried that part of his life because he believed he had to, because there was nothing left to hope for. And now, Maya. No Layla? He didn't know what to call her yet, and maybe that was the part that scared him most. Footsteps sounded behind him. He turned. Victoria stood in the doorway, her hair pulled back, her silk robe replaced with a crisp navy dress. But her eyes were bloodshot. Her pride, however, stood unshaken. "I see you're still entertaining the fantasy," she said. Daniel didn't flinch. "You burned her. She was stealing. She was ironing my shirts." Victoria crossed her arms. "You really believe that girl is your sister?" "I believe we don't know what the hell we're dealing with, and a DNA test will give us facts. But I also believe I saw something real in her eyes last night, something familiar." Victoria scoffed. "You always had a savior complex." He stepped toward her, his voice low. "You're not the victim here. I didn't say I was." No, but you acted like you were entitled to hurt her. You attacked a woman, an employee, because she made you uncomfortable." "She made you comfortable," Victoria snapped, eyes narrowing. "That's the problem." Daniel stared at her. There it was. Jealousy, the festering kind. The kind that started as insecurity and turned into cruelty. "You're right," he said. "She did make me comfortable. Because she's kind. Because she reminds me of someone I loved and lost. And maybe, just maybe, it's because she is that someone." "You're throwing away everything for her?" "No," he said quietly. "I'm trying to find something. Something we all thought was lost." Victoria shook her head, disgusted. "You don't know her. She could be lying. Manipulating you." Daniel's eyes darkened. "And what if she's not?" They stared at each other for a moment, two strangers who once believed they could build a future together. "I want you to leave," he said. "Stay at the summer house for a few weeks, until this is resolved. I'm your wife. You were also nearly her murderer." Victoria's breath caught. "You need to go," Daniel repeated. "And you need to think about what you've become." She didn't speak. She turned and left. And Daniel was alone again with the fire, with the memories, and with the growing suspicion that his entire life was about to be rewritten. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed, pendant unwrapped in her hand, the chain dangling between her fingers. And then she did something she hadn't done since she was a child. She prayed, not for clarity, not for peace, but for courage, because she knew the truth wasn't just going to free anyone. It was going to burn. The next morning, Charleston's skyline woke under a thin blanket of fog, stretching like a hush across the city. But inside the Reed estate, the fog hadn't lifted. Maya stood alone in the formal dining room, her eyes scanning the table she had spent the last hour setting. The long mahogany surface gleamed, adorned with fine china, sterling silver, and crystal glasses. A fresh bouquet of white lilies, Daniel's mother's favorite, sat in the center. Every piece was perfectly placed. Yet everything still felt wrong. Her arm still throbbed beneath the bandages. She moved it slowly, favoring the side that had been burned. The pain was more than physical. It pulsed beneath her skin like a question with no answer. She turned toward the tall windows, staring out at the garden. She could just barely see the stone path that led to the back of the estate, lined with boxwood hedges and dotted with marble statues. She remembered walking it her first week here, thinking it looked like something from a painting. Now, it felt like a memory trying to break free. "Miss Williams?" The voice pulled her back. It was Mrs. Ellison, holding a small envelope. "This was dropped off by Mr. Sanders' office this morning," the housekeeper said gently. "Mr. Reed wanted you to have it." Maya took it slowly, her fingers trembling as she opened the flap. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper, a certified confirmation from the DNA lab. Her eyes froze on the first line. "Biological match confirmed." Maya sat down before her knees could give out. She read the line again, and then again, as if it might change the third time. Confirmed. She wasn't just a maid. She wasn't just a survivor. She was Layla Reed. Her breath hitched. A part of her had braced for this. A part of her had hoped. But hope was a fragile thing. And now that it had solidified into truth, it felt heavier than she expected. 1,000 thoughts collided at once. Her real name. Her real family. Her parents dead. A brother she didn't remember. A life stolen by fire and time. She placed the paper on the table and pressed both hands over her eyes. A sound at the doorway made her look up. Daniel stood there, his tie still loose, a weariness in his shoulders that hadn't been there days ago. "You saw it," he said. She nodded slowly. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to." He walked over and sat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. The quiet wasn't awkward, it was reverent. Finally, Maya found her voice. "I used to imagine what it would be like, finding family, knowing where I came from, but now that it's real," she trailed off. "It feels too big," Daniel finished. She nodded. "I looked for you," he said. "After the fire, I never stopped. Not really. But everyone told me to move on. My father said clinging to ghosts would kill me. He might have been right." Maya tilted her head. "But I wasn't a ghost." "No," he said softly. "You were just lost." They sat in silence again. Then Maya asked, "What were our parents like?" Daniel smiled, a flicker of something warm in his eyes. "Our father was strict, stubborn, built everything with his hands, including his fortune. Our mother, she was light. Soft music, soft voice. She used to sing to you every night. Something French. You'd hum it in your sleep." Maya blinked hard. A melody fluttered across her memory like a leaf in wind. She couldn't quite catch it, but it was there, haunting. "Gentle," Daniel continued. "She died a few years after the fire, never recovered. She'd sit on the porch, watching the lake, singing that song, alone." "I'm sorry," Maya whispered. He shook his head. "You didn't do anything wrong, but I wasn't there. You were 2 years old. None of this was your fault." Maya glanced down at the pendant, still tucked in her hand. "This was the only part of me I ever had. And I didn't even know what it meant." Daniel looked at it. "That pendant was a symbol, a gift from our grandmother, passed down to the girls in the family. You were the last to get one." Maya traced the edge of the gold. "I've been wearing a legacy I didn't even know I belonged to." "You do belong to it," Daniel said. "And you belong here. With me." She looked at him, tears brimming. Even after what Victoria said, he didn't hesitate. "Victoria's gone. I asked her to leave. She's staying at the summer house for now." Maya's brow furrowed. "Will she be back?" Daniel sighed. "I don't know. Maybe. But things won't ever be the same." Maya nodded. She didn't wish harm on anyone, but she didn't wish silence either. Not anymore. "You're safe now," Daniel added. "And we'll take it slow. Whatever you need, however long it takes, I'll be here." She let out a shaky breath. "Thank you." He stood and walked toward the window, staring out at the mist-covered garden. "You know," he said, "this house was built on ashes. After the fire, I tried to recreate something perfect. I thought if everything looked untouched, maybe I could feel untouched too." Maya stood beside him, their reflections side by side in the glass. "But you can't erase pain by decorating over it," she said quietly. He turned to her. "No. But sometimes, when the smoke clears, you find something worth rebuilding." And for the first time, they both smiled. The Reed Foundation's annual gala had always been a spectacle: marble columns wrapped in soft gold lighting, string quartets playing Vivaldi near the grand staircase, and Charleston's most elite floating from one champagne tray to another like swans. This year was no different, at least on the surface. But underneath the polished elegance, a quiet shift was happening. Maya stood at the edge of the ballroom, dressed in a sleek black evening gown borrowed from the Foundation's formal wear storage, Mrs. Ellison's idea. Her hair was swept into a low bun, a single curl escaping near her cheek. Around her neck, the pendant hung for the first time, not as a mystery, but as a declaration. Daniel had asked her to attend. He had insisted. "We don't hide family," he had said that morning. Maya had protested. "I'm not ready." "You don't need to be," he replied. "You just need to be seen." So here she was seen. Everywhere she turned, eyes followed. Conversations paused. Smiles faltered, only to be replaced quickly with the practiced gloss of high society. Daniel watched from across the room, standing with two board members, but his gaze never drifted far from her. He wasn't just watching out of protectiveness. He was watching like someone who had finally found something he'd been grieving in silence for decades. "Maya," came a low voice beside her. "You okay?" She turned to find Greg Sanders, Daniel's attorney, holding two flutes of sparkling water. "I don't think I've ever been less okay," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. He handed her a glass. "You're doing fine. They'll get over it." "Will they?" she asked, glancing at the sea of dresses and diamonds. "They don't know whether to offer me a drink or ask for a towel." Greg chuckled. "Give them time. Society loves a redemption arc, especially when it comes with a legacy fund." "Is that what I am? A headline?" He hesitated. "No, but you are the story now." Maya took a sip and tried not to let her hand tremble. Her eyes scanned the room again, so many familiar faces from the house. Board members, benefactors, family acquaintances. All of them had seen her carrying trays not long ago. Now, they were staring like she was someone else entirely. But she wasn't. She was still Maya Williams. And also Layla Reed. Somewhere between those two names, she would have to find herself. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Daniel had stepped onto the small stage near the orchestra pit. A spotlight clicked on above him. He didn't wait for silence. He simply began. 24 years ago, he said, my family lost something we thought we'd never get back. Heads turned. Champagne glasses stilled midair. My little sister, Layla, vanished in a house fire. Her body was never found. Only ashes and grief. And I've carried that silence with me every day since. A hush blanketed the room now. Until last week, Daniel continued. When a woman came into my home, a woman I had hired as a maid wearing a pendant that should not have existed. And with it, a story. Her story. People glanced toward Maya now, unsure whether to stare or look away. Daniel's voice softened. That woman is not just someone I employed. She is someone I share blood with. She is my sister. Anne, gasps, low and scattered. A camera clicked. Maya stood still. Her name is Maya Williams. She grew up in the foster system, unaware of her past, unaware of who she truly was. But through a series of painful, unexpected events, the truth came out. He gestured gently. I would like you to meet her, not as staff, not as a guest, but as Layla Maya Reed. Maya didn't move at first. Then, slowly, she walked forward. The pendant sparkled under the stage lights. Her heels clicked against marble in a rhythm steadier than her breath. She stepped up beside him. Daniel took her hand, gently, like something sacred. She's going to be co-chair of the Reed Foundation from this day forward, because no legacy is complete without truth. Polite applause began, cautious at first, then growing louder. Some clapped because it was expected. Some clapped because they truly felt something shift. And a few clapped because they saw, in Maya's face, not a maid in borrowed silk, but a woman who had survived a fire and somehow walked back into her own story. Later that evening, as the crowd began to thin and the musicians packed their cases, Maya stood alone again near the terrace doors. The cool night air wafted through, scented with magnolia and something older, something like memory. Daniel joined her quietly. You did good. I feel like I'm still in someone else's skin. He glanced at her. You'll grow into it. They stood in silence. Then she asked, do you think they believed it? He gave a half smile. Some did. Some will need more time, but that's not the point. Then what is? He looked at her. That you believe it. She nodded slowly and turned her eyes to the garden beyond the glass. I think, she said, I'm starting to. By Monday morning, the story had broken. It started with a whisper in the social column. Billionaire Daniel Reed introduces sister believed to have died in childhood fire, then spread like wildfire. The headline crawled across morning news tickers. Radio hosts discussed it with barely concealed disbelief, and hashtags like #Reed reunion and #The Maid is his sister trended by mid-afternoon. Maya sat curled on the far end of the living room couch, clutching a warm mug of coffee she hadn't touched. The TV was on mute, But every 5 minutes, a different news anchor's lips moved behind images of her standing beside Daniel on stage, or awkwardly smiling in a black dress she hadn't chosen herself. She had become a symbol, and symbols didn't get to rest. Daniel entered the room with a folder under his arm and 2 cell phones buzzing on silent in his coat pocket. He looked tired, like the world had reached through the screen and grabbed him by the collar. "They're digging now," he said, sitting beside her. "Old school files, orphanage records, employment papers, your social security trail. Everyone wants to know where you came from." "I don't even know where I came from," Maya murmured. "They want a story," he said, "and if we don't tell the right one, they'll write their own." She looked at him, eyes wide. "You mean lie?" "No," he replied. "I mean be deliberate, not defensive. We tell the truth, but we shape it." Maya swallowed hard. "I don't know if I'm ready to be anyone's headline." "You already are." They sat in silence for a moment. Daniel handed her the folder. She opened it to find a stack of documents, official copies of the DNA results, notarized legal papers, and a court motion he'd filed to reinstate her birth name. Lila Maya Reed. Her heart skipped. Seeing it on paper made it both more real and more unreal at once. "I can't force you to use it," he said gently. "But it's yours. Legally, and by blood." Maya ran her fingers over the embossed seal. "I don't know if I'm ready to be her." Daniel leaned back. "Neither was I when I became the last Reed. But you don't have to be ready. You just have to be willing." She gave a weak smile. "Is that your lawyer voice?" "No," he chuckled. "That's my brother voice." The moment was broken by the house intercom. "Mr. Reed?" Mrs. Ellison's voice came through. "There's someone here asking for Miss Williams. Or, Miss Reed." Maya's head shot up. "Who?" "Journalist." The housekeeper replied hesitantly. "Local, the Post, and Courier. She says she's been following up on an anonymous tip about a past incident here. She's asking about an injury." Daniel's expression darkened instantly. "Tell her to leave the premises immediately. If she doesn't, I'll have security escort her off the property." Maya stood. "Wait." Daniel looked at her. "Maya, I'm not going to hide," she said, surprising herself. "But I won't feed it either. Let her write what she wants. I know the truth." Daniel studied her for a beat, then nodded. "You're stronger than I was at your age," he said. "I had no choice." Later that afternoon, Maya wandered into the music room. It was the one part of the estate she'd never cleaned. No one used it anymore. It smelled faintly of old wood polish and time. In the corner stood an upright piano, untouched but recently tuned. She approached it hesitantly and lifted the lid. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then, slowly, she played 3 notes. A tune formed in her mind, a half-remembered melody she had heard only in dreams. It was soft, lilting, French. No lyrics. Just rhythm and warmth. She closed her eyes. Outside the doorway, Daniel froze. It was the lullaby, their mother's lullaby. He hadn't heard it in 2 decades, not since that final summer at the lake house. He stepped forward slowly. Maya stopped playing when she saw him. He was pale. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "It's just always been there." He sat beside her on the bench. "Our mom used to sing it to you every night," he said quietly. "You couldn't sleep without it." Maya blinked back sudden tears. "I thought it was just a dream." He looked at her. It was a memory. They sat there, 2 shadows of a broken family trying to make their way back to light. "I used to think that fire took everything," Daniel said, his voice hushed. "But now I'm starting to believe it only buried it. And we just had to dig through the smoke." Maya turned toward him. "What happens next?" she asked. Daniel gave a tired smile. "Now we get to rewrite what Reed means. And what if the world doesn't want to let us?" He looked her dead in the eyes. "Then we show them what it costs to tell the truth." That night, Maya sat at her desk, journal open. She wrote slowly, deliberately. "My name is Maya Williams. My name is Layla Reed. Both are true. One is the past I lived. The other is the future. I must choose. I am not fireproof, but I survived the burn." 3 days later, Maya stood outside the Charleston County Courthouse, the late morning sun glinting off the white stone columns. A chill wind swept in from the harbor, tugging at the hem of her blazer, but she didn't shiver. Her grip on the manila envelope in her hands was steady. She hadn't told Daniel she was coming here. This step had to be hers. Inside the envelope were a few pages, the finalized DNA results, her updated identity documentation, and the reinstatement of her birth certificate bearing the name Layla Maya Reed. All legal now. But legality wasn't what she needed to face today. She entered the courthouse slowly, her heels echoing against the marbled floor as she made her way toward the archives department. The hallway was quiet, just the soft murmur of lawyers and clerks, the click of computer keys behind frosted glass doors. "Can I help you, miss?" the clerk asked behind the counter. "I'd like access to adoption records, specifically from Street Bernadette's orphanage, year 2001. The woman tilted her head. "You must have court clearance for those." Maya slid the signed affidavit across the counter. "I do." The clerk blinked. "Well, all right then. Give me a few minutes." Maya nodded and stepped aside. She tried to breathe, but each moment felt like a century. "What am I looking for?" she wondered. Not answers, proof of the silence. After about 10 minutes, the clerk returned with a small box labeled Reed, female, unknown guardian, 2001. Her chest tightened. Inside were just a few forms. A photo, a caseworker's handwritten notes. She scanned them slowly, her name written as Maya, surname marked unknown, then a faded line. Child found wrapped in a yellow blanket. Necklace with pendant. Gold. Engraved R. Minor smoke exposure. No identifying documents. Then a second note. No further leads. Presumed abandoned. Maya closed the file. That was it. That's all she had been. A note, a guess, a name given by strangers. It was easier to cry when someone hurt you. But it was different, heavier, when the world simply forgot you existed. As she stepped outside again, she felt the weight of 24 lost years settle in her bones. And yet, she was still standing. Daniel was waiting in the front parlor when she returned. One leg crossed. An old family album open on his lap. The fire had burned low, casting shadows across his face. "Where'd you go?" he asked, closing the book. "I needed to see the paper trail for myself," she said, hanging up her coat. "I thought maybe there'd be a clue, some hint of who saved me, why I survived." He nodded slowly. "And?" "Nothing." She sat beside him. "Just blank spaces with my name penciled in. No signatures, no story, just missing pages." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I remember that morning. The fire, the sirens. I remember screaming for you. I never thought." His voice broke. "I blamed myself. You were a kid too." Still, Maya looked at the fire, watching it flicker and spit. "Sometimes I wonder what kind of person I might have been if the fire hadn't happened." Daniel looked over. "But it did happen. And you're still here. That says more about you than any what if ever could." She exhaled. "Do you think Mom would recognize me now?" A pause. Then, softly, "She would have known you in a heartbeat. Not by your face, by your heart." That night, after dinner, Maya wandered into the study again. The pendant dangled from her neck, glowing faintly in the lamplight. She pulled an old journal from the shelf, a leather-bound one with gold trim that once belonged to their mother. It was filled with recipes, pressed flowers, notes written in French and English. And then, halfway through, a folded page. She opened it. It was a letter, addressed to Layla, never sent. "If you're reading this, my sweet girl, it means the worst has come to pass. But I believe, in some far-off thread of time, you will find your way back to this house, to this family, because I believe in the strength I saw in you, even as a child. If you ever forget who you are, remember, you are love, you are fire, and you are the miracle that survived both." Maya pressed the paper to her heart. That night, she did not dream of flames. She dreamed of a woman singing in a language she did not know, in a room filled with Sunday. And for the first time since her return, she felt warm. Morning came with golden light spilling across the marble floors of the Reed estate, bathing the halls in warmth. The staff moved quietly through the house, polishing, arranging, preparing for another day, but something in the air had changed. There was a stillness, a sense of breath being held. Maya stood in the solarium, wrapped in a soft cardigan, barefoot on the cool tiles. She sipped her coffee slowly as she stared out into the garden, the same garden she had once been told not to step foot in. The family space, Victoria had called it. But now, she was family. She pressed a hand against the glass. The magnolias were starting to bloom early this year. Behind her, Daniel appeared in the doorway. "You're up early." "I haven't been sleeping much," she replied without turning. "Too many thoughts, and some very loud birds." He chuckled lightly and stepped beside her. "I was thinking, I want to take you somewhere today." She looked over, curious. "The lake house," he said. "What's left of it?" Maya froze. "The one from the fire?" He nodded. "It's mostly ruins now. My parents never rebuilt, but I think we should see it, together." Maya's heart thudded. Part of her wanted to run the other way, but another part, the part that had stared down fire before, whispered, "Go." "I'll go," she said softly. The drive took 2 hours. They rode in silence for the first half, Maya watching the landscape blur into pine trees and long country roads. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel, the other tapping lightly to the rhythm of an old jazz station. Halfway there, he reached into the glove compartment and handed her a small photograph. It was faded and bent at the corners, 2 children, one older boy in a sweater vest, grinning, and a little girl with soft curls and a gap-toothed smile. She was wearing the pendant. "That's the only picture we still have of you," he said. Everything else burned. Maya stared at it, emotions swelling in her throat. "She looks free." "She was," he said, before the silence swallowed everything. The lake house appeared as they turned down a gravel path. Time had weathered the once grand structure into a skeleton, charred beams, collapsed roof, vines creeping across brickwork. The dock was gone. The chimney stood like a gravestone. Maya stepped out of the car and inhaled slowly. The scent was familiar. Smoke, pine, and water. Her feet crunched against the gravel as she walked toward what was once the front porch. Grass and weeds had overtaken the steps. Part of the railing lay in the bushes. She stepped over what remained of the threshold and froze. A memory struck her like lightning. A yellow cup, a rocking horse, the sound of her own laughter. She turned sharply and looked at the blackened corner of the house, what used to be the nursery. "I remember this," she whispered. "The color of the curtains. They were blue. And the floor squeaked when you walked to the closet." Daniel's eyes widened. "Yes, they did." She took another step and knelt, brushing leaves aside. There, buried in the dirt, was a rusted metal buckle. From a child's sandal. His sandal. She picked it up slowly, her hands trembling. "I was here, though." Daniel knelt beside her. "You never left?" "Not really." They sat in the ruin, surrounded by ghosts, but it wasn't grief that overtook them, it was reverence. After a while, they walked to the lake. The water was still and clear, reflecting the sky like glass. "I always thought if I ever brought someone here again, it would be to bury the past," Daniel said. Maya looked at him. "And now?" "Now I think it's where we plant something new." On the drive back, Maya fell asleep. When she awoke, the car was pulling into the estate driveway. Waiting at the gate was a figure in a dark blue coat. Daniel slowed the car, frowning. "That's strange." The woman wasn't security. She wasn't a neighbor. Maya's heart started to pound. As they approached, the woman turned around slowly, early 50s, African American, weathered but elegant. Her eyes locked with Maya's. And something deep inside Maya jolted. Daniel rolled down the window. "Can I help you?" The woman hesitated. Her voice cracked. "I think you can. I might be the one who pulled that little girl from the fire." Maya's breath left her body. "What?" Daniel said, stunned. "I was a nurse." The woman continued. "At the time, I never got over what happened. I kept tabs. When I saw the news this week, I saw her. I had to come." Maya stepped out of the car slowly. "You saved me?" she asked, her voice trembling. The woman nodded, eyes shining. "I didn't know your name, but you had that necklace. I kept it for days. Prayed over it. Then I brought you to the orphanage. I wasn't supposed to, but I didn't trust the system. I thought maybe someday you'd find your way back. Maya walked toward her, tears spilling. Do you know your name? She asked. The woman smiled gently. Miss Johnson. You can call me Ruth. Ruth. Maya said the name like a prayer, and then she did something she hadn't done in years. She opened her arms and fell into someone's embrace, not as a stranger, not as a maid, not as a secret, but as a daughter reborn from fire, into a truth no longer buried. The sun dipped low behind the moss-covered oaks, as Ruth Johnson sat at the Reed Estate's long dining table, her fingers curled around a mug of chamomile tea. The light caught in the streaks of silver in her hair, and her presence filled the room like the warmth of an old hymn, steady, solemn, and somehow sacred. Maya sat across from her, still in awe. It had only been an hour since Ruth revealed the truth, that she had pulled Maya from the fire as a child and carried her into the next chapter of life. But in that short time, the fragile picture of Maya's past had begun to color in at the edges. Daniel had stepped back for now, giving the women space. You were the only one who went back in, Maya said softly, cradling her mug. Everyone else thought the fire was too far gone. But you. Oh, I heard a cry, Ruth said, her voice quiet, not loud, like a whisper in a storm. I was off duty that night, visiting my cousin near the lake. We were walking back from her garden when we saw the flames. People were screaming, running, and then I heard it again, that cry. I knew it was coming from inside. Maya's hands trembled. You didn't even know me. Ruth smiled. Didn't need to. A child's cry doesn't need an introduction. It needs an answer. She paused, sipping her tea. I got inside through the back. The nursery was already half collapsed. You were under a pile of blankets, curled up like a little knot, smoke everywhere. I wrapped you in the same yellow sheet I found you in and ran. Maya couldn't hold back her tears. I've wondered for so long. Why I was the only one who lived. Why I wasn't claimed. Why no one found me. You were in shock. Couldn't speak. No ID. That necklace was the only clue. No. Ruth reached into her coat pocket and gently pulled out a faded envelope, sliding it across the table. I kept this, she said. Didn't know why. Maybe for closure. Or maybe for a moment like this. Maya opened the envelope with careful fingers. Inside was a photograph burned at the corners, but still legible. It showed a young nurse standing beside a fire truck, holding a soot-covered toddler wrapped in a yellow sheet. Maya, and in the nurse's eyes fierce determination. You saved me twice, Maya said, her voice thick. Once from the fire, and again when you didn't let me get lost in the system. I tried, Ruth said, brushing away a tear, but I wasn't family. The orphanage took over. They wouldn't let me adopt. I visited once, weeks later. They told me you'd been moved. No record. No forwarding. Maya looked down at the photo, heart pounding. They erased me. They misplaced you, Ruth corrected gently. But now you're found. No. From the hallway, Daniel appeared, watching quietly. His gaze softened as he took in the scene, two women bonded by fire and fate, sitting across a table where, only days ago, Maya had sat invisible. He stepped forward. Miss Johnson. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to, Mr. Reed. I didn't come for gratitude. I came because God put something back in my hands that I once feared was lost forever. She stood slowly and looked at Maya, and I came because there's something I need to say to you. Maya nodded. I was the one who placed that name on your intake form, Maya. It was my grandmother's name. Strong, quiet woman. Taught me to listen first, speak last. Maya smiled. It always felt like a name I hadn't earned, but now I think, maybe I was meant to grow into it. Ruth nodded, her voice warm. You have. Later that night, after Ruth had gone to the guest house Daniel had arranged for her, Maya sat in the garden alone. The stars blinked quietly overhead, and the stone bench she sat on was cool beneath her hands. She looked up at the moon, bright, still, steady. Then she spoke aloud, to no one in particular. Why me? The breeze didn't answer, but a memory did. Her mother's voice soft, singing. Her brother's laughter, a yellow blanket, a nurse's arms, and fire, always the fire, but no longer as a destroyer. Now it felt like a forge. Behind her, Daniel stepped into the garden, walking slowly. "You okay?" he asked. "I am," she said. "For the first time in years, I think I am." He sat beside her. "She's remarkable," he said. "Ruth. She's the reason I'm here." Daniel looked up at the stars. "Do you ever wonder what you'd be like if you'd grown up here?" "With us?" "I used to," Maya said. "But not anymore. That girl wouldn't be me." He turned to her. "And who are you now?" She smiled, not forced, not sad, just real. "I'm the keeper of the fire, the one who walked through it and came out still standing. Not whole, but standing." Daniel nodded, his eyes misty. "Then maybe this house, this legacy needs someone like that." She reached out and took his hand. "We both do." They sat there until the stars grew faint and the first hints of dawn painted the sky. And for once, neither of them felt alone. It was 2 weeks after Ruth's arrival, and the Reed estate had started to settle into a quiet rhythm again. Maya walked with new steadiness now, no longer with the cautious steps of someone bracing for impact. She moved with awareness of herself, her story, her blood, and that awareness shifted how the walls of the house responded to her. Where once there had been stares, there were now nods. Where once there was avoidance, now there was space. Even the staff, who had known her as the girl who worked quietly in the background, now greeted her with warmth. She never demanded that change, but she felt its quiet arrival, like a long-awaited spring. Still, not every corner of her world had thawed. Victoria was returning today. Daniel hadn't spoken much about it, just a short mention over breakfast that morning. "She's due back before dinner," he said, not looking up from his newspaper. "She asked to talk." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Talk to you?" She didn't say. Maya sipped her coffee. "You sure you want to let her back into the house?" Daniel hesitated, then folded the paper. "Legally, she still owns half of it. And I want answers." "We both do." Maya nodded, but her stomach twisted with unease. Victoria's words, "she stole from us," still rang in her ears like a cold bell in a warm room. She glanced at the fading scar on her arm, just below her sleeve. Some wounds healed, others remembered. At 5:06 p.m., a sleek black car pulled through the gates. Maya stood by the window upstairs, watching the vehicle curve around the circular drive like a predator circling its prey. Victoria stepped out in full Charleston chic white trench coat, dark sunglasses, hair pinned back in a perfect twist. She looked rested, composed, dangerous. Daniel met her at the front door, his stance stiff. "I wasn't expecting a welcome committee," she said smoothly, removing her glasses. "I wasn't expecting you to call," he replied. "I told you I needed time. I took it." They stared at each other for a beat, until Victoria's gaze flicked over his shoulder. And there, at the top of the staircase, was Maya. Victoria's jaw tightened. "She's still here," she said. Daniel's voice dropped. "She lives here. You're a guest." Victoria scoffed lightly and stepped inside, brushing past him. Funny how quickly that changed. 2. Maya descended the stairs slowly, measured, each footfall a quiet statement. "I'd say it's nice to see you again," she said evenly, "but I don't lie as easily as you do." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Still playing victim, I see." Maya's tone didn't waver. No, just no longer playing small. They stood facing each other in the grand foyer, the chandelier casting fractured light between them. Daniel remained a few steps back, observing. Victoria's gaze shifted. "You've stirred up quite the storm, haven't you? Press coverage, gala appearances, tearful reunions, all very poetic." Maya tilted her head. "I didn't stir the storm. I was the storm. You just didn't see it coming." Victoria stepped closer. "You think this house will accept you? That this family will accept you? Being his sister doesn't erase where you came from. And hurting people doesn't erase where you're going," Maya said quietly. Victoria's composure cracked for just a second, but only a second. Daniel stepped in. "Why did you do it, Vic? Why hurt her? Why accuse her?" Victoria blinked, then turned her back to them and walked toward the sitting room. "Because I knew who she was the moment I saw her." Maya's breath caught. Daniel frowned. "What are you talking about?" Victoria turned slowly, not consciously at first. "But the necklace. the way she carried herself. Something in my gut screamed threat. I didn't know why, but when I saw that pendant, it clicked. She was your past, Daniel, a past that didn't include me. That's not a reason, Maya said. That's a confession. Victoria's face hardened. You think I'm a villain, that I'm the witch with the iron, out to scar the innocent, but I was drowning in a life I never chose. Do you know what it's like to spend 10 years trying to be the perfect wife to a man who mourned a ghost every single day? Daniel stared at her. You could have told me the truth. No. And lose what little control I had left? I saw you looking at her, even before the tests. Like some part of you had been waiting for her your whole life. How could I compete with that? You weren't supposed to, Daniel said. You were supposed to care. Victoria's lips curled slightly. I cared enough to fight for what was mine. Maya stepped forward, but I was never yours to fight. The silence that followed was thick and final. Victoria picked up her coat. I'll have my attorney contact you. I'm not staying. Daniel gave a slight nod. That's for the best. As the front door clicked shut behind her, Maya let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Daniel turned to her. Are you okay? Maya stared at the door for a long moment. Then she said, I'm not angry anymore. Just done. They stood in silence, side by side, watching the wind shake the magnolias outside. Daniel finally spoke. That wasn't closure, but maybe it was. Exposure. Sometimes, Maya said, the truth doesn't set you free. It just lets the rot see the light. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what would come next. The days that followed Victoria's departure were quiet, but not empty. The estate settled into a strange kind of stillness, like a home after a storm. The air had changed. The echoes that used to bounce off the walls were softer now. It was as if the house itself had been holding its breath, waiting for something to pass. And it finally had. Maya stood on the back porch, watching the groundskeepers trim the hedges near the rose garden. Ruth sat nearby on a wooden bench, humming softly, as she sewed a patch onto a worn quilt she brought with her. The two women hadn't spoken much that morning, but comfort didn't always require conversation. It's funny, Maya said at last, breaking the calm. I used to walk these halls afraid to breathe too loud. Now I open the windows. Ruth looked up, smiling. That's what truth does. Opens windows. Maya walked toward the edge of the porch and looked out at the wide, trimmed lawn. This house isn't just a place anymore, she said. It's a witness. It remembers things. All of it. The fire, the silence, the screams that never got answered. But also, the returns, the healing. Ruth nodded slowly. A house can hold pain, but it can hold redemption too. Behind them, Daniel emerged from the house, holding a stack of letters. His expression was unreadable. You might want to see this, he said, handing Maya an envelope. She opened it cautiously. The letterhead was embossed with an unfamiliar crest, an old Southern family name. Inside, a short note. Miss Reed, I watched your story unfold on television. I knew your mother. She was kind to me when others weren't. I have something that belonged to her. Something that may help you fill in the blanks. I would like to give it to you. Ruth Langston. Maya read it twice, then looked up at Daniel. She knew our mother? He nodded slowly. Langston family's been around Charleston for generations. Old money, old stories too. She wants to meet me. Ruth Johnson set her stitching aside. Then you go. The Langston estate sat just outside the historic district, a stately brick house with ivy curling up the sides like time's fingerprints. Maya stepped out of Daniel's car, the pendant at her neck glowing faintly in the sunlight. Ruth Langston greeted her at the door. She was in her 80s, frail but alert, with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Her silver hair was tied back neatly, and she wore a pearl brooch shaped like a magnolia. You have your mother's eyes, she said softly as she opened the door. Maya was taken aback. You knew her? I knew her before the world did, Ruth said. Before the foundation. Before the tragedy. They sat in a parlor that smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. On the coffee table sat a wooden box, polished, small, locked with a brass clasp. She gave this to me when she was pregnant with you, Ruth explained. Told me to keep it safe. Said if anything ever happened, it should go to her daughter. Maya's fingers trembled as she opened the lid. Inside, A stack of folded letters handwritten in delicate script, photographs, a pair of earrings, and one pressed flower, a magnolia, perfectly preserved. The first letter was addressed to "My darling girl, if you're reading this, then the worst has come to pass." Maya couldn't breathe. Ruth reached out gently, touching her arm. She knew. Somehow, she knew you'd come back. That night, Maya sat alone in the Reed Estate's library, a small fire crackling behind her. She unfolded the letter and read it again. "Life is full of things we cannot choose, but love, my sweet girl, is not one of them. I chose you the moment I knew you were coming. If the world forgets you, remember that I never will. Even in ash, I will look for you." Tears spilled freely down Maya's face. Daniel stepped into the room, wordless, and sat beside her. He didn't ask what the letter said. He didn't need to. Instead, he placed something in her lap. A key. "What's this?" she asked, blinking. He looked at her with something between pride and awe. "Your mother's study. We sealed it after the fire. I had it restored last month. I thought, maybe it was time." Maya rose to her feet and walked down the hall. Her steps slowed as she approached the old door at the end, the one she used to dust without ever opening. She unlocked it. The room inside was filled with light. Stacks of journals, photographs on the wall, books that smelled like time. A soft red chair by the window. A pair of ballet slippers, faded with age, hung on the corner of a mirror. Maya stepped inside and turned slowly in a circle. She didn't feel like a visitor. She felt like someone who had just walked into a memory she'd forgotten belonged to her. She sat at the desk and opened the top drawer. Inside, a small note in their mother's handwriting. "Layla, if you find your way back to this room, then the fire did not win. Welcome home." For the first time since the truth had surfaced, Maya let herself smile. Not because the pain was gone, but because now she finally knew where to place it. The next morning dawned with a golden hush, the kind that blanketed the world before the day's noise arrived. Maya sat in the center of her mother's study, barefoot, wrapped in a shawl, surrounded by quiet memories made of ink and dust. She had spent the night reading journal entries, notes, and letters written in the steady, looping script of a woman who had never expected to become a ghost. The journals told of a life behind the Reed fortune, the pressure, the scrutiny, the complicated balancing act of being a woman in the South married into power but yearning for something softer. Maya turned another page and paused. Daniel doesn't sleep unless Layla's lullaby is sung. And Layla, my bright girl, never cries unless the music stops. Tears welled in her eyes. Her mother had known her deeply, fully, and now, through pages written decades ago, Maya was beginning to know her mother, too. The door creaked behind her. It was Daniel, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I figured you'd still be here," he said quietly, handing her one. Maya smiled as she took it. She wrote everything down. Like she knew I'd need it. She was always 3 steps ahead of everyone, including herself. They sat for a while, the silence comfortable. Maya finally asked, "Did you ever come in here?" Daniel nodded. "Once. A week after the fire. Everything was covered in soot, waterlogged, the glass shattered. I couldn't stay. It felt like breaking into a cathedral." Maya looked around. "It does feel sacred." Daniel leaned forward. "There's something I need to show you. But it has to stay between us. For now." "No." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old iron key, heavier than any modern lock would require. "This doesn't go to anything in the house," he said. "It belongs to a storage unit in town. One of the older ones downtown back when Dad kept physical ledgers and legacy files. I've been going through the records. There's a box with your name on it." Maya froze. "Mine?" He nodded. "It's time we open it. You and me." Lying. The storage unit was tucked between an antique bookstore and an old bakery on Church Street. Its stone facade had long lost its original signage, replaced with a rusted plate that simply read, Unit 24. Inside, the air was thick with dust and old secrets. Rows of shelving lined the space, and in the far corner, wrapped in tarpaulin, sat a single chest marked, Layla, Private. Daniel pried it open slowly. Inside, a collection of baby items, a faded yellow dress, a silver rattle, a stuffed bear. Maya picked up the bear. her fingers trembling. She turned it over and found stitching under one ear. L.R. "My name," she whispered. Daniel found a stack of documents under the bare hospital records, birth certificate copies, photos that had clearly been duplicated for safekeeping. "I thought everything was lost in the fire," Maya said, breath-catching. Daniel looked puzzled. "It should have been. Bose." At the very bottom of the box was a cassette tape in a plastic case, labeled Layla's Song. He stared at it, then at her. "I don't remember ever seeing this before." They took it back to the house, and Daniel retrieved an old cassette player from the attic, one of their father's. The tape clicked into place. A soft hiss, then music. Piano, slow, gentle, and then her mother's voice, singing in French, low and tender. Maya clutched her chest. Daniel whispered, "That's it. That's the lullaby." Maya's eyes filled with tears. She recorded it, for me. The song ended after 3 minutes, then silence, until a second voice, a man's. "Layla, if you're hearing this one day, it means you found your way back. I'm your father, and I hope this reaches you with love, not pain. We never stopped looking. We didn't know where to look." Daniel's hands went still. "That's Dad." Maya pressed her fingers to her mouth, her body trembling. The voice continued. "There are things in this world that get lost, but love, real love, leaves breadcrumbs. Follow them. They'll always lead you home." The tape clicked. Silence. But the silence this time felt full, like a final page turning with grace. That evening, as twilight blanketed the estate, Maya stood outside her mother's study, holding the tape in her hand. She looked out over the property, the oak trees, the driveway, the silhouettes of life lived and lives lost. Ruth appeared beside her, arms crossed gently. "You're thinking too loudly," Ruth said softly. Maya smiled. "I found a recording. My parents. They left something behind." Ruth nodded. "Parents always do. Sometimes it's a voice. Sometimes it's silence. But both speak. I used to think all I had was the silence. Now you know different." Maya looked down at the pendant resting on her chest. "They wanted me to find my way back. And you did." Maya turned, not just to them, to myself. And for the first time, the weight she had carried for decades didn't feel like a burden. It felt like roots. The Charleston Annual Preservation Gala was an event of elegance and history, a gathering where Southern heritage was not just remembered, but flaunted. Held in the grand ballroom of the Pennington Museum, it was a place where the city's oldest names shook hands and traded legacies over bourbon and string quartets. Daniel Reed had been attending since he was 12. This year, he arrived with Maya, and when they stepped through the marble archway, the room hushed for half a breath. Maya wore a deep emerald gown, simple, elegant, and timeless. Her hair was swept back, revealing the gold pendant at her neck that now gleamed like a banner. She walked tall beside Daniel, not on his arm like an accessory, but shoulder to shoulder. She felt their eyes. She welcomed them, because for the first time, she wasn't hiding. And neither was the truth. The news of Maya's identity had spread quietly but surely. There had been no press release, just the inevitable ripple of a story too powerful to stay secret. The Reed heir had returned, not from Harvard or Europe or some distant boarding school, but from the ashes of a forgotten childhood, wearing the name they'd buried and the truth they never expected. Whispers followed them as they moved through the crowd. "She's the one. That's his sister? The Maid? I heard she survived the fire. Isn't that incredible?" But none of it pierced her. Not tonight. Because at the far end of the ballroom stood Ruth Johnson, elegant in a navy blue dress, waiting with the calm presence of someone who had already seen the fire and come through smoke unsinged. Maya smiled and made her way toward her. "You clean up real good, baby," Ruth said with a wink. "You taught me everything I know," Maya replied, her voice full of warmth. They hugged quickly, not wanting to draw more attention, but the bond was there, undeniable. Daniel joined them, offering Ruth a glass of sparkling cider. "You nervous?" he asked Maya. "A little. You shouldn't be." "I know," she said, and for once, meant it. The gala's guest list included judges, CEOs, and descendants of old Confederate generals who still held onto cotton money and family pride like relics. Among them was Councilman Richard Pennington, the evening's host and one of the few who had known Maya's mother personally. "Daniel," Pennington said, shaking his hand, then turning to Maya. "And you must be Miss Reed. I confess, you've stirred quite the conversation." "I'm sure I have," Maya said, smiling politely. He lowered his voice. "You look just like your mother." Maya's breath caught, but she nodded. "Thank you. She was good to this city. Quiet about it, but generous. We lost something when we lost her. You being here, it matters." Maya wasn't sure what surprised her more, that he said it, or that he meant it. As the night progressed, Maya wandered into a side gallery lined with portraits of Charleston's founding families. Oil paintings loomed above her, their frames thick with gold and ego. She stopped before one, a woman in a high-necked dress, gaze stern and distant. The plaque read, "Eleanor Ashcroft Langston, 1864. She whispered to herself, "How many stories like mine never got told?" "Too many," came a voice behind her. It was Ruth Langston, the elder woman who had given Maya her mother's preserved letters and the pressed magnolia. She wore a silver shawl, her eyes soft with history. "You came," Maya said, surprised. Ruth nodded. "These halls remember too much. Someone has to remind them what they forgot." They walked together for a few quiet moments. "Your mother believed legacy was more than money or names carved into plaques," Ruth said. "She believed it was about who you protect, who you lift up." "She protected me," Maya said. "And now it's your turn." Maya turned to face her. "What if they never accept me? What if I'm always just the girl from the fire?" Ruth shook her head gently. "Then be the fire, child. Be what they can't ignore." Later, Daniel took the stage to offer the annual family remarks. His speech was brief. He spoke of preservation, responsibility, and history. But before stepping down, he cleared his throat. "There's one more legacy I'd like to acknowledge tonight," he said, his voice echoing in the hall. "One we almost lost." He extended a hand, and Maya walked onto the stage. A collective inhale rippled through the room. "This is my sister, Layla Maya Reed," Daniel said, "and she is the reason our family name still means something." Maya looked out at the crowd. She saw surprise, curiosity, resistance, but she also saw something else. Recognition. She stepped to the microphone, steady as the earth. "I was born in this city. I was raised by strangers. I was marked by fire, but I was never burned out. I stand here not to reclaim a title, but to remind every person in this room that truth doesn't come wrapped in pedigree. Sometimes it comes with soot under its nails and scars on its skin." She paused, "But truth always comes, and tonight, it's wearing this dress." Applause broke out, first quiet, then louder, until it filled the entire room. That night, back at the estate, Maya stood in her mother's study again, barefoot on the rug, the cassette tape resting beside a candle. She lit the wick, not in mourning, but in offering, a flame to the past, a promise to the future. And in the mirror across the room, she saw herself whole, present, and finally, home. The morning after the gala, sunlight streamed into the estate like a guest returning home. Maya sat at the kitchen table with Ruth Johnson, their hands wrapped around mugs of coffee, the hum of the early day buzzing faintly through the windows. "You changed the room last night," Ruth said, her voice tinged with pride. "Not just with that speech, with your presence." Maya gave a soft smile. "I felt something shift, yeah, but I'm not sure if it was the room or me. Probably both." "Lou." They sipped in silence for a few moments before Maya leaned in, lowering her voice. "There's something I didn't mention at the gala. I've been receiving anonymous letters. 2. So far. Both typed. No return address. Each one mentions the fire. But the second one said, 'You don't know everything about that night.'" Ruth's expression tightened. "You tell Daniel?" "Not yet. I didn't want to stir up paranoia. But something tells me it's not just some crank." Ruth nodded slowly. "Then we find out who's still hiding." Daniel stood in the Reed library, sorting through the last of the storage records. Maya entered quietly, holding both letters. "I think someone's watching," she said, handing them over. He read them, eyes narrowing. "They're not random. Whoever wrote this knows details. Look at the way they reference the fire, what was left behind. Not everyone in that house was asleep. He looked up. That's not the public story. Exactly. Daniel set the letters down and walked to the fireplace, staring into its dark hearth. I remember waking up to screaming. It wasn't just the alarms. It was someone else. Maya's eyes sharpened. Someone alive. Daniel nodded. I always thought it was you, but it couldn't have been. They found you unconscious. A silence settled between them, dense and full of questions. Let's go back, Maya said. To the lake house? No, she said. To the fire. To the people who were there that night. With the help of an archivist friend of Daniel's, they tracked down a list of first responders and staff who were on duty the night of the fire. One name stood out, a former security guard named Wallace Price. He had retired shortly after the incident, lived alone outside of town. They paid him a visit. Wallace's cottage was small, lined with fishing gear and dusty furniture. The man who answered the door was in his 70s, with a limp and a gaze that darted too quickly between them. Mr. Price, Daniel said. I'm Daniel Reed. This is Maya Reed. Wallace paled at the name. I thought you were dead? Maya asked softly. I saw you carried out, he muttered, by a nurse. That black woman, strong, fierce, wrapped you up like her own. That was Ruth, Maya said. She saved me. Wallace stepped back, letting them in. The house smelled like old wood and pipe tobacco. Wallace shuffled toward an armchair and sat down slowly. There's something I never told anyone, he said, voice low. That night, I heard two people arguing on the second floor. Not your parents. Two men. One was shouting. The other was calm. Too calm. I only caught a name. Langston. Maya stiffened. Langston? Wallace nodded. After the fire, they told us it was faulty wiring, told us not to talk, but I knew something wasn't right. And then a week later, the files on the security logs disappeared. I kept my mouth shut. Daniel exchanged a look with Maya. The Langston family, old Charleston money, respected, untouchable. What if, Maya whispered, what if the fire wasn't just a tragedy? What if it was cleansing something, or someone? That evening, back at the estate, Daniel retrieved a fireproof box from the private safe. Inside were documents his father had marked as pending litigation. Maya unfolded one labeled Reed, Langston Development Agreement, terminated. The Langstons were supposed to go into a real estate deal with Dad, Daniel explained. It fell apart 6 months before the fire. Over money, permits, ethics, and maybe, Maya said slowly, more. She pulled out another sheet, a private letter from George Langston to their father. You think your wife's influence makes you untouchable, but everything has a cost, Reed. You're not ready to pay it. Maya's blood ran cold. Ruth entered the study at that moment and stopped short when she saw the papers. I know that name, she said. Langston. There were rumors at the hospital about their reach, how they paid for silence, made evidence disappear. Daniel leaned over the desk. This isn't just about a family feud. It's about a cover-up. Maya stood slowly, staring at the documents, the name Langston stamped across multiple pages. I need to see Ruth Langston again, she said. Not Ruth Johnson Langston, the elder. Ruth Johnson nodded solemnly. Be careful, baby. That family doesn't like when you pull back the curtain. Maya's jaw set. Then it's time we yank it down. The Langston mansion stood like a monument to a past that refused to die. Gabled rooftops, gas lanterns flickering by the front steps, and iron gates that had once been hammered by enslaved hands now gleamed under the late afternoon sun like polished lies. Maya sat in the passenger seat of Daniel's car, her fingers tracing the edge of her pendant. Her breath came slow, steady, not calm, but deliberate. Daniel parked at the curb, turned off the engine, and looked at her. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. He gave a small nod. Then I'm with you. The butler who opened the door recognized them instantly. Mrs. Langston is expecting you. They were led through marble halls, past rooms hung with oil paintings and stiff furniture that looked better suited for posing than living. The air was heavy with magnolia and hush money. In the sunroom at the back of the estate, Ruth Langston waited. She sat in a wicker chair beside a tall window overlooking the garden. Her silver hair coiled like a crown. A crystal tumbler of tea at her side. "Miss Reed," she said, voice even. "Mr. Reed, I admit, I was surprised to get your call." Maya stepped forward. "Then I won't waste time. We need to talk about the night of the fire." Ruth's eyes didn't blink. "What about it?" "You told me my mother was kind to you," Maya said, "that she trusted you, enough to give you letters keepsakes." "She did. But you didn't give me everything." A pause. The older woman leaned back, folding her hands in her lap. "No," she said finally, "I didn't." Daniel stepped forward. "We found correspondence between your husband and ours, threats, terminated deals. We also spoke with a former security guard who heard shouting between two men the night of the fire. One of them said your name." Ruth Langston's jaw tightened. "I believe you loved my mother," Maya said, "but I also believe you protected someone." Silence blanketed the room. Outside, a lawn sprinkler ticked quietly, the water hissing like a whispered warning. Finally, Ruth spoke. "My husband was not a kind man," she said, her voice soft and brittle, "nor a patient one. When your mother pulled out of the development deal, he saw it as a betrayal, and when she refused to endorse his political campaign, her hands gripped each other tightly. I heard them fighting, in your father's office. I came late to the gala that night, but I saw the argument. I heard George say, 'She's going to ruin everything.' He wanted leverage. He said, 'If the wife won't bow, the family will burn.' I thought he was being metaphorical." Her eyes glistened now. "I didn't know he meant it literally." Maya's voice was low. "And when the fire happened?" Ruth looked away. "He was calm. Too calm. The moment I realized what he'd done, I threatened to go to the police. He threatened me in return. Said the whole family would fall yours. Mine. Said no one would believe a hysterical wife over a respected businessman. My do. You let a child vanish into the system," Daniel said bitterly. "I left her treasures in that box," Ruth whispered. "I left them for you. I couldn't stop what he did, but I could try to protect what little of her remained." Maya took a breath that tasted like rust and smoke. "You should have done more." "I know." They sat in that grief together for a long, quiet moment. Then Ruth reached under her chair and pulled out a manila envelope. "I found this after his funeral. It was locked in his private desk. I've never shown anyone." Inside were photographs, grainy security stills from the night of the fire. One showed a figure entering the house's side door well after midnight. A second image showed smoke beginning to billow from the left wing, the nursery wing. A third photo, Maya, wrapped in yellow, being carried out by Ruth Johnson. And one final image, George Langston, walking away from the house with a briefcase. No panits. Just distance. He made sure the fire started where the records were kept, Ruth Langston said. "Your parents were supposed to be at the gala. But your mother came home early. She had a migraine. She went to lie down. No one expected her to be there." Daniel whispered. "He didn't just burn the past. He tried to burn the future." Maya rose to her feet slowly. "This isn't over," she said. "People need to know." Ruth nodded, her voice almost a whisper. "Then tell them. Just know this city protects its ghosts." Maya walked to the door. "I'm not here to chase ghosts," she said. "I'm here to finish what my mother started." Back at the estate, Maya laid the photographs out across the study desk. Daniel stood behind her, silent. "I want to tell the truth," she said. "Not just in whispers, not just in this house. I want to speak it out loud, publicly." "You sure?" he asked. She nodded. "It's not about revenge. It's about restoration." "No." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we start with a press conference. The Reed Foundation. Your name. S-R-S-S-I-T. She turned to him. "Our name." They smiled, two survivors, bonded not just by blood, but by the burden of remembering. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the magnolia trees like applause from the past. And somewhere in the distance, Charleston held its breath again. The conference hall was set, the press invited, the podium flanked by twin flags, one bearing the seal of Charleston, the other the Reed Foundation's emblem, two interlocking branches, oak and magnolia. Maya stood backstage, smoothing the front of her dark blue blazer. It wasn't designer, it wasn't flashy, but it was hers. She had chosen it deliberately. It reminded her of the dress her mother wore in one of the old photographs Ruth Langston had given her. Strong, southern, without apology. Daniel walked up beside her, adjusting his tie. The room's packed. City council, journalists, even the historical society chair showed up. "I'm guessing not for the mini quiches," Maya said, forcing a small smile. He looked at her gently. "You're doing the right thing." "I know," she said, "but it doesn't mean it's going to be easy." From behind the curtain, they could hear the low murmur of a restless audience. Cameras clicked. Reporters shifted. Maya took one last breath, centered herself, and nodded. "Let's do it." The hall quieted the moment she stepped out, not because she was famous, but because she was unexpected. A black woman, standing at the heart of Charleston's legacy like a flame at the base of old paper. Her presence was no longer a question. It was an answer. She took the podium. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice strong. "My name is Layla Maya Reed. Some of you know part of my story. Some of you don't. But I promise, by the time I'm finished, you'll know why I can no longer remain silent." Behind her, a large screen flickered to life, displaying the first of the photographs, her as a baby in her mother's arms. "I was born in this city, raised in it, forgotten by it." She detailed her adoption, the fire, the loss of her identity. She spoke of the trauma of waking up in foster homes with no memory of who she truly was, of becoming Maya Williams, not by choice, but by circumstance. And then, the shift. "My story is not unique," she said. "There are thousands of children whose names were lost to smoke and silence. But what is unique is what I found when I returned to this home, to this family." She paused, the photograph now shifting to the image of George Langston leaving the burning house. "There is a history in this city of burning the truth when it becomes too uncomfortable to preserve." The audience tensed. She continued, "My mother, Diana Reed, was targeted because she stood for something bigger than land deals and political donations. She stood for equity, and someone in power decided that was a threat." Reporters began scribbling faster. Flashes clicked. She wasn't just a victim of a fire. She was a victim of calculated silence. "I have proof, and I won't be burying it in family vaults or legal settlements." A lawyer from the Langston firm stood up, visibly flustered. "Miss Reed, are you accusing a sitting historical board member of criminal arson?" Maya's eyes didn't flinch. "I'm stating that I have evidence. I'm stating that George Langston manipulated records, threatened witnesses, and destroyed lives. If the legal system won't investigate, then the public will." A ripple of energy shot through the room. Daniel stepped up beside her. "For the record," he said, "I fully support my sister. The Reed Foundation has already filed a petition for an independent inquiry. This is no longer a family issue. This is a city issue." Another hand shot up. "What do you hope to gain by all this?" Maya looked directly into the crowd. "Not gain," she said. "Restoration, not just for me, but for every voice that's been drowned out by the sound of old money and sealed doors." Hours later, after the reporters had gone, the lights dimmed and the building emptied, Maya sat alone in the green room. Her hands still trembled slightly. She stared at her reflection in the vanity mirror, older now than she'd ever felt, but steadier than she'd ever been. Ruth Johnson entered quietly, carrying a glass of sweet tea and a tired smile. "You didn't just open the door," she said. "You took it off the hinges." Maya let out a breathless laugh. "Is that good or bad?" "That's justice, baby. And justice don't knock. It enters." Ruth sat beside her and gently tucked a stray curl behind Maya's ear. "I've seen powerful men run from truth their whole lives," Ruth said. You turned and faced it. That's a kind of courage you don't get taught. You're born with it." Maya looked down at her hands. "They're going to come after me, aren't they?" Ruth nodded. "They already are. But I'm not alone." "No," Ruth said. "You've got the ancestors. And me. And Daniel. And that fire inside you they thought would die out." Maya looked up, and her reflection no longer frightened her. She didn't see the orphan, didn't see the maid. She saw the air, the survivor, the storm, and tomorrow, she would walk into whatever came next with her back straight and her voice steady, because the city had heard her now, and once the truth speaks, it echoes. 2 days after the press conference, the city of Charleston was humming with speculation. News outlets dissected every word Maya had spoken. Talk shows debated her intentions. Social media split like a fault line, some lauding her as a courageous whistleblower, others questioning her motives, even her identity. But none of that mattered now. The investigation had been opened. Subpoenas were being filed. And the Reed estate, once a place where whispers clung to corners like dust, now pulsed with movement lawyers coming and going, archivists combing through old records, security reinstalled on every floor. Maya stood at the foot of the grand staircase, watching it all. "This house used to feel like a tomb," she said quietly to Daniel, who stood beside her. "Now it feels like a courtroom." He glanced around. "Some truths need a trial." She smiled faintly. "Some need a torch." Daniel gave a dry laugh. "You brought both." That afternoon, the city council convened a special session. An anonymous tip leaked to the media had claimed George Langston's campaign had laundered money through shell properties, including properties originally co-owned by Diana Reed before her death. The link to the fire was still circumstantial, but momentum had shifted. Langston's descendants were furious. They called Maya's actions a smear campaign, an attempt to rewrite history. And then, someone tried to scare her. It came as a message, slipped under the estate's front door. Typed, short, "You don't know what you're waking up. Go back to sleep, girl." Ruth Johnson found it first. She didn't call the police. She marched straight into Maya's study, handed her the note, and said, "Let 'em come." Maya read the words. Her hands were steady. "They're afraid," she said. "Good." Daniel had it scanned and delivered to the city's legal investigators. Within hours, security was doubled, but Maya didn't hide. That night, she made a choice. She would speak again, not at a press conference, but on air. Charleston Radio, 105.7, had a long-standing weekly segment called The Memory Line, a place where locals called in and shared stories about the city's past, its myths, its changes. It was a platform mostly used by the older population folks who still remembered where the cobblestones came from. Maya appeared as a guest the following evening. She wore headphones over her curls and stared into the mic as the host gave her the floor. "This is Maya Reed," she began. "You may know me as the woman who came back from a fire, or the girl who became a maid in her own family's house. But today, I'm just someone asking this city to look at itself." She paused, letting her words land. "I was born into legacy, lost to silence, raised by kindness. And now I'm standing in the rubble of my own history, asking what happens when the truth makes us uncomfortable." Callers flooded in. A woman named Lorraine, 82, said, "I remember your mama. She used to bring books to the children's ward at the hospital. Never asked for praise. Just did it." A man named Clifton, 75, added, "Your daddy once paid off my mortgage after the hurricane. Told me not to say nothing. I never forgot that." And then, silence, until a new voice broke in. Male, crisp, measured. "My name is Henry Langston," the voice said, "and I'm George Langston's son." Maya tensed. The host looked at her for direction. She nodded once. Henry continued, "I've spent my whole life defending my father, but I just heard the tape. The one your mother left. I got a copy from my Aunt Ruth. I heard the song. I heard the love. And I heard something break inside me." Maya's heart pounded. Henry's voice cracked. "If there's a reckoning coming, I won't fight it. Maybe it's time Charleston stopped covering the cracks in the walls and started fixing the foundation." 0. The line went dead. The host looked stunned. Maya leaned forward, eyes shining. "That's the beginning of healing," she said softly. The next morning, Maya received a package at the estate. No return address. Inside, an old reel of microfilm, carefully labeled, "Reed Langston Investment Records, Pre-Fire." Attached was a note in scrawled cursive. "They buried a lot, but some embers refused to die." The evidence was growing. A full audit of the Langston family's land development deals was opened. Donations that had seemed philanthropic now glared with suspicion. Tax filings, burned records, anonymous donations traced back to shell companies. The city's Heritage Council was forced to remove Langston's name from 2 buildings pending investigation. The house divided. Some protested outside the estate. angry that Maya was tearing down tradition. Ugh. Others rallied beside her, many from Charleston's black community, many survivors of injustices that had never made headlines. The estate lawn became both a sanctuary and a battlefield. But Maya didn't flinch. She stood on the steps with Ruth Johnson one evening, watching a small candlelight vigil below. Young voices sang an old hymn, "We Shall Not Be Moved." Maya whispered, "I don't want to be a symbol." Ruth replied, "Symbols don't get to choose, but you can be more than that." "Oh, what then?" Ruth touched her heart. "A witness." Inside the house, Daniel found another piece of the puzzle, an old cassette player hidden in their father's former study, marked with tape. Inside it, a second tape, labeled in faint ink, "Diana Private, don't play unless." They sat together and pressed play. Her mother's voice, clear, "If you've found this, something has gone wrong, but it also means you're still searching. Layla, Daniel, I want you to remember that truth isn't always safe, but it's always worth it. Even if it costs you everything." Maya closed her eyes, tears slipping down. "We're almost there," Daniel said. Maya nodded, and outside, Charleston no longer whispered. It listened. The courtroom was packed, not with the curious or the scandal-hungry, not just with lawyers and city officials, but with neighbors, teachers, janitors, nurses, people who had once walked past Maya on the street without a second glance, people who now saw her as a mirror they'd long avoided. Maya sat at the plaintiff's table, dressed in quiet confidence. Daniel was beside her. Their legal team shuffled papers, whispering last-minute reminders. But Maya wasn't nervous. She was ready. Across the aisle sat the Langston family representative, stone-faced, arms crossed. George Langston was dead, but his shadow still loomed, thick as smoke. Today was about that shadow. Today, it would finally lift. The judge entered, a middle-aged black woman whose robe carried more weight than the gavel she never needed to slam. "We're here today not only for civil proceedings," she said, "but to confront an uncomfortable truth. The destruction of evidence, the manipulation of public trust, the deliberate erasure of a child from her own family tree." No. Maya felt Ruth Johnson's presence behind her, sitting in the first row like a mountain, solid and immovable. The pendant around Maya's neck, her mother's, lay warm against her skin, almost pulsing. The first witness was called Wallace Price, the retired security guard. He took the stand, voice steady despite his shaking hands. "I saw George Langston that night. He was inside the Reed home. He wasn't supposed to be there." Gasps. Then came Ruth Langston. She looked older than ever, but her voice did not tremble. "My husband threatened the Reeds. He was angry. Diana pulled her support from his campaign. I didn't think he'd act on it, but I was wrong. I found the photos, the letters. I've kept them all these years." When Maya's name was called to the stand, the room felt like it took a collective breath. She stepped forward, raised her hand, swore to tell the truth. And she did. From her earliest memories of foster homes to the moment she realized the woman she had called Mama for years wasn't her real mother but the one who burned in a fire to protect her. She spoke of pain, of loss, but also of discovery. "My mother didn't just die in that fire," she said. "She fought in it. For me. For truth. And I stand here not to avenge her, but to honor her." The judge listened intently. When the testimonies ended and the recess was called, Maya stepped outside onto the courthouse steps. Dozens had gathered, not for protest, but support, elders from the community. Young people who had watched the press conference. Survivors of lost causes. Maya stood before them not as a hero, not as a victim, but as something more permanent. A voice that would not go quiet. "I didn't ask for this," she told them, "but I won't walk away from it either. The Reed name doesn't belong to history books. It belongs to truth, and that's what I promise to protect." The applause wasn't loud. It was solid, like an oath. The judge's ruling came 2 weeks later. The court recognizes that the Langston family engaged in a coordinated effort to silence, suppress, and erase critical evidence relating to the 1998 fire at the Reed estate, she read. "The damages awarded to Maya Reed shall be symbolic, not for profit, but for preservation." The Reed Foundation will receive full stewardship of the historical records and legacy holdings. The name Layla Maya Reed shall be restored in all legal and historical registries. Maya didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She simply breathed, like someone who'd been holding it for 25 years. The house felt different when she returned. Not haunted, but humbled. Ruth Johnson had prepared her mother's study with care. The desk polished, the curtains drawn to let in the light. On the mantel sat a framed copy of the court's ruling. Beneath it, the baby photo that once sat in a forgotten box. Daniel entered quietly, holding a folder. "I saved this for last," he said, handing it to her. Inside was a deed, transferring full ownership of the Reed estate to her. Maya blinked. "Daniel," he smiled. "It was never about property. It was about truth, and it belongs to you." She touched his hand, gratitude too full for words. Together, they stepped out onto the front porch. A group had gathered on the lawn again, neighborhood kids playing tag, elders chatting on benches Ruth had installed, volunteers planting fresh flowers along the walk. Maya watched them, hand resting gently on the column beside her. "You think it'll ever stop being strange?" she asked. Daniel chuckled. "You mean people knowing your name?" "No, people saying it right. Hegrinnet, Layla Maya Reed." She smiled. "That's me." Weeks passed, then months. Maya gave talks across the state on legacy, on silence, on reclamation. The Reed Foundation expanded its outreach, funding programs for displaced youth, historical truth commissions, and women's education initiatives. One afternoon, Maya stood alone beneath the massive magnolia tree her mother once sat under. She wore jeans, no makeup, hair wild and free. A little girl walked up to her, no older than 6. Light brown skin, wide eyes, holding a paper flower. "Are you the lady from the radio?" she asked shyly. Maya knelt. "Yes, I am." The girl offered her the flower. "My grandma said you saved your mom's name." Maya took the flower gently. "I'm trying," she said. "And maybe one day, you'll save someone else's." The girl smiled, nodded solemnly, and skipped away. Maya stood beneath the magnolia, holding the paper bloom. A soft wind stirred the branches, and she felt it, not just the presence of the past, but the welcome of the future. She was home, at last. Maya's journey teaches us that truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of rising. Her life, once silenced by injustice and forgotten by privilege, became a powerful reminder that identity is not just inherited, it is claimed. Through courage, resilience, and the refusal to be erased, Maya showed that confronting the past isn't about revenge, it's about healing. The story reminds us, justice may come slowly, but it comes louder when we dare to speak.